signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the public hearing is closed. I don't see any old business before us, new business. Item number 1. Excuse me. Case 23044, DTE Garage Addition Final Site Plan Approval Extension. The applicant, Alicia D'Angelo of Tetra Tech, on behalf of DTE Energy, has applied for a final site plan approval extension. The location is parcel number V 12583046990011704 at address 8001 Haggerty Road. The development is located on the east side of Haggerty Road, just south of Ecorse Road. And we have a presentation by the township staff.
Yes, thank you.
Director Akers.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So DTE Energy has requested a final site plan approval extension for the proposed construction at their site located at 8001 Haggerty Road. Their initial request that was approved in December of 2023 is to construct a 1,900 square foot building addition, which contains 3 vehicle bays for housing additional vehicles in queue for repair. As I had indicated before, final site plan approval was granted by the Planning Commission on December 13th, 2023, and the applicant has been working towards obtaining their building permits for the project. And as of December 2024, the township has reviewed and approved the applicant's building plans. But as we were going through that process, we had identified that the site plan had expired, and due to this, the applicant has requested this extension. The zoning code allows the Planning Commission discretion to allow for 2 12-month extensions of a site plan approval. And based on the progress that has been made on the building plan and the current status of the project, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission do grant this 12-month extension. That concludes my summary. I'm happy to answer any questions the Planning Commission may have.
Okay, thank you. And could we please to the podium and introduce yourself for us, please?
I'm Alicia Donilo, project manager with Tetra Tech. So Director Akers went through that pretty thoroughly. Our project is a 1,900 square foot garage addition to provide 3 more vehicle maintenance bays for the DTE staff. And this project did have site plan approval in December of 2023. I submitted a letter and request to extend that site plan approval in December of 2024. And we were in active review of the plans during that time for the building permit, and they have since been approved.
Okay, thank you. Planning Commission, do we have any discussion on the topic?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Commissioner Juror.
An extension, if it were to be granted, the next extension would expire on December 13th, 2025? Or would that be an extension from the time of this meeting, January 22nd, 2026?
So
That's
I
that first
suppose-
one, isn't it, Director?
So yes, you could extend it to 2025. The way our zoning code set up, as long as the applicant starts construction, they're allowed to continue. So we have a building plans that have already been reviewed, and so we're at the stage where we're ready to issue a building permit. So it is the 2025 date, that December 13th date. But I'm fully confident they will be able to start construction before December 2025.
We'll add to that the project has been bid out and awarded to a contractor as of this month.
Just got to get warm.
A little bit before they start digging.
That's the only question I had, sir.
Okay, anybody else? Discussion? Seeing nothing, anybody from the public? Anyone from the public? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion concerning this item.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Jar.
I move to grant the applicant, Alicia Donilo, of Tetra Tech on behalf of owner DTE Energy, a 12-month extension of the site plan approval for case number 23044, which was originally granted on December 13th, 2022. Based on the analysis and subject to the conditions detailed in the letter of staff dated January 12th, 2025, noting that this constitutes the first of the two possible 12-month extensions allowed by Section 12.207 of the zoning ordinance, with this extension to expire on December 13th, 2025.
Support.
We have a motion and support.
Just support with one correction, that the original site plan approval was December 13th, 2023. You had mentioned 2022 in your motion.
I will absolutely accept that that was 2023. I seem to have had a printer glitch earlier, and I am missing the center of my number. So amended. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we have a motion, add support. Do we have any further discussion?
No, you had the support.
Oh, yeah,
Support it,
you
sure.
support it. Yeah, no, I said we have a motion and support.
First meeting.
Seeing no further discussion, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Jackson Paul. Peter Creel.
Yes.
Bernie Grant. Sherry Budd.
Yes.
Jeff Jar.
Yes.
Brian Cullen.
Yes, you have your extension. Motion carries. You have your extension.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item number 2 on the agenda, the B-Rod height and setback ordinance draft and discussion. First up, presentation by township staff. Director Akers.
Thank you. I will turn this presentation over to our planner, Mr. Gage Belko.
Mr. Chair. All right, there we go. Just for the sake of a little refresher here, we've drafted an ordinance for an amendment to Article 6, Chapter 3 of the Township Zoning Ordinance for the Belleville Road Overlay District. We propose an amendment to subsection C2I to read as follows. Additional building height. For buildings of 4 stories, may be permitted to exceed the maximum height of the underlying zoning district up to 50 feet, provided that for each foot of additional height or fraction thereof, the front setback shall increase by 2 feet, the sum of which shall be in the form of foundation landscaping with plantings. Further, for any 4-story building over 40 feet, the facade of that 4th story, inclusive of eaves and awnings, shall be stepped back no less than 10 feet from the facade of the 3rd story on all sides with street frontage. This area shall contain garden terraces, landscaped green roofs, solar panels, or other environmental features or user amenities as approved by the Planning Commission. And we would recommend that the Planning Commission send a recommendation of review and approval, or adoption rather, to the Board of Trustees pertaining to these revisions.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any discussion within the Planning Commission?
We talked about it at the last
Yep.
meeting, Mr. Chairman. I think we covered it.
Okay, is everything in accordance? That's what we asked for? Okay. Do we want to recommend this to the zoning, recommendation of the zoning ordinance amendment to the Board of Trustees?
I'd be happy to make a motion in the affirmative, sir.
Okay, please do so.
Mr. Chair, I move to recommend to the Township Board that they adopt the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance text to allow for additional building height in the Belleville Road Overlay District, as described in Article 6, Chapter 3, Section 6309, subsection C2I, and as described in the McKenna letter dated November 18th, 2024, and in the document included with the packet that was presented this evening. Your approval or support. Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Jar, supported by Commissioner Creel, Do we have any further discussion on the motion?
I got all the numbers right, didn't I, Mr. Commissioner? Thank you, sir. No, I'm not kidding, it's, my printer really messed up.
Could I have a roll call vote, please?
Bernie Grant,
Yes.
Sherry Budd,
Yes.
Peter Creel. Jackson Paul. Jeff Jar,
Yes.
Brian Cullen.
Yes. Motion carries. We will send that on to the Township Board of Trustees. Item number 3, non-residential PUD ordinance draft. Presentation first up by the Township staff. Director Akers?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I want to apologize ahead of time. I seem to have lost most of my notes on this, so I'm going to go from memory, and if there are any questions that come up or any members of the subcommittee that want to fill in the gaps, I would certainly appreciate it. So at the last meeting, we postponed action on this because that there were some items that the township attorney had asked that we review and address. And so we had done that, and what I wanted to do was highlight some of the items that had changed from the last submittal to the current submittal. And then what we'll do, if the commission would prefer, I can kind of go through the ordinance and kind of give an overview of what it is and what it does. So to kind of talk about process, the Planning Commission, I believe it was in November, established a subcommittee to work on this draft version of the ordinance and modifications of the ordinance to kind of work through it, understand it. And the subcommittee met several times to be able to do that. There was a lot of great discussion, a lot of good information, and great input on it. And I think it created an ordinance that works fairly well. The reason why we had initially proposed an industrial or non-residential PUD ordinance is because our zoning ordinance did not have the capability to allow for non-residential PUDs. And with some of the larger properties that we have in the township that were identified in our economic development plan and our marketing plan, we wanted to create an option for the Planning Commission to have an additional tool and have some flexibility to consider some developments on these type of sites. Flexibility is intended to promote better site design, encourages innovation in land use planning, can conserve natural resources, and there's a handful of other things that includes that's in the ordinance. But so before I kind of give an overview, I did want to highlight some of the changes that were recommended by the attorney and some of the changes that had occurred between the last version and the current version. So one of the changes that we made is something that we had found that we had kind of made an error on. There was a provision in section 6.507E, which is on page 9, where it talks to dock to floor area ratio for warehousing facilities. The intent of that section of the ordinance was to make sure that that dock to floor area ratio was consistent with our M1 standards. We had initially put in 1 to 4,000, which was not consistent with those standards. The correct requirement is a 1 to 8,000 square foot gross floor area ratio. So that has been corrected on the updated version, which is before you. The other items that were brought up by the township attorney, pull it up. Give me just 1 second. This was another comment that was brought up that had been intended to change. It was under 6.508D under exceptions. There was under D3, it said up to 100% of required open space in PUD may include, the prior version said up to 100% of required open space in PUD may include preserved natural areas, provided however those areas accommodate walking or similar passive leisure pursuits. One of the comments that was brought up in committee, and I believe before the Planning Commission, was for some of these industrial properties, there may be some walking areas that we didn't, or maybe some open areas that, because of the nature of the industry or the business, they may not want to have open to the public or available. So the text was amended in the updated version just to indicate that up to 100% of required open space in the PUD may include preserved natural areas. So we pulled out that standard. And then item E under that, irrevocability. Based on the comments in the attorney, we simplified that statement. So rather than having some of the specific standards and items in there, we changed the language to indicate that the open space in the PUD shall be set aside by the developer, and ownership and maintenance shall be addressed by the PUD agreement. And then we require that the PUD agreement have a maintenance standard and maintenance schedule for open space. And then under 6.508, item F, under redevelopment, one of the questions that we had asked about the township attorney, and one of the discussions we had was whether or not these PUDs can be site condominiums, which the attorney had indicated to us that they could be site condominiums because it addresses how the lots are split, where the PUD is kind of more overarching, expressing what you can do on the site through zoning. But based on those conversations that we had with the township attorney, and some of the processes that were put in there as far as open space changes and adjustments, it really, what it did was it kind of duplicated some of the procedures and processes that were in there. Any change to a PUD or any change to a development that's in a PUD, no matter what's going to have to come back before the Planning Commission one way or the other. And so, having some additional provisions that maybe, I think there was one, so change to a certain PUD, certain elements of the PUD couldn't be accommodated for the first 25 years of the date of the initial development agreement. After kind of looking at that, we believed it was kind of an additional requirement. No matter what, it's always going to have to come before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is going to act as kind of a gatekeeper for those type of developments and those type of items. So based on those conversations, we ended up removing item or section F. And those were, looking back through, some of the comments I had, those were the major changes between the two versions that we had. So what I'll do is I'll kind of go through some of the individual sections, and of course, if there's any add-ins by any of the committee members, please feel free to jump in. But intent and purpose didn't really change a whole lot from the initial version. The additional considerations, are intended to kind of specify some of the things that they look at in those PUD agreements. The PUDs under 6.503A, it lists what modifications are allowed. So you can look at site area or lot coverage, building setbacks, building area, building height, those type of things. Those are items that can be requested. Section B in there lists what the modification criteria are. So it lists how all the modifications are listed in and some of the things that we should be taking a look at when those modifications are requested. So innovative design, public services, community character, compatibility, those type of things. There's 6.504 addresses eligibility for the standards for which those PUDs are eligible. 6.505 discusses what districts that we allow in our approval procedure. So these PUDs are going to be, they can be approved as a special use in any of the zoning districts, subject to the standards. And then it also, in that section, prohibits, has some specific standards for uses. So with special approval, you can do any use in any of the zoning districts. You can have multiple zoning on a PUD, and this was something that was discussed by the committee, but on a PUD parcel with multiple zoning designations, there's a standard that gives the planning commission some discretion to consider a mix of uses anywhere on the parcel. You know, it lists some concerns regarding some of the come from some of the industrial districts, and it also prohibits certain uses that can be on the site. I don't want to go through this line by line as it's intended. You know, I know the committee spent a lot of time working on that and doing that work for the planning commission. And at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions the commission may have regarding the proposed ordinance.
Regarding what?
Proposed ordinance.
The heat kicked on. I couldn't hear.
Planning Commission, any discussion concerning this?
Through the chair, I do have I have a couple of items. In rereading through this, one of the items that I have concern about is on section 6.505, districts and uses. Item 6, where it says utility substations, gas stations, and the similar use structures that support the industrial and/or commercial uses on a site shall be placed in a manner that conceals them from view of the public right-of-ways or adjacent residentially zoned parcels. And then it gives some consideration here. In the next sentence, the planning commission may consider a modification of this requirement if the applicant adequately demonstrates the proposed location is the only feasible option. This feels to me like it really addresses location. Basically concealment regarding location rather than concealing the structure itself. And I think it needs to address concealing the structure itself. If, say, the only quote-unquote feasible location is, you know, next to a right-of-way that is next to a residential neighborhood, this substation, if it's a substantial development, could be fairly large, and they're not exactly pretty looking. They have a lot of electrical equipment, typically fenced. So that's not concealing it, but if that's the only option, that's a problem, I think, adjacent to residential neighborhoods. So I'm thinking that I would guess that you could maybe split this up regarding residential and not only just say address location for concealment, but also address concealing it if it's out in the open and very apparent to a residential neighborhood. So that would be my first one. And if there's any kind of, say, screening that's required, I think maybe to look at screening a little bit so that someone's not just putting a cyclone fence around it with plastic strips in it. So it could be done in a couple, there could be some kind of, and it could be just mainly the portions that face the residential. So maybe it doesn't have to go all the way around all three sides, but maybe all four sides, but maybe three. And I mean, there's this group, it could be maybe an architectural wall or something bermed up to it, or a combination of that with landscaping. So there's options that could be. I'm just saying it looks to me like something like this should be addressed a little bit more in detail.
Okay.
That would be that one.
Can I participate in the discussion?
Absolutely, jump in.
So what you're concerned about is that the manner of concealing them from public rights-of-way may not be consistent with the screening requirements of other buildings in the township?
No, I'm saying that this is not saying that it needs to be screened from residential. It just says that it just addresses location so that it, you know, in a manner that may conceal it, unless there's a problem with that. That's kind of how I'm reading it. I don't see anything about screening it. I just see something about placing it in a location that conceals it. And if you can't find one and the best location doesn't do that, then we would give them exception just to leave it exposed.
Oh, I see what you're saying, that I think what
There
you're,
needs to be some means of concealing it.
Yes.
Yes.
Just putting it in a location that may conceal it.
putting it in the only feasible location does not absolve the applicant from doing screening from the residential area. You still have to conceal it, you still have to put up screening, is what you're trying to say.
Yes, but that's not saying this.
That's not said in this thing.
It looks, if I may, it looks like section 6.515 addresses landscaping and green belt buffers on the property lines of the PUD.
I've seen that, but you're not calling to screen. It's not saying that the substation should be screened.
The only, and certainly we can adjust it to whatever the planning commission would like it to be adjusted to. I know because of the way it's stated, it's a requirement, and then it gives the planning commission the flexibility to do it if they choose to do it. I know, but it doesn't explicitly require that they do it. I know a lot of times when we have situations like these where, it gives some flexibility. I know, at least I can tell you at the staff level, if the intent of the ordinance is to screen something from the right of way or from a residential property, and if they can demonstrate they can't do it, we're usually asking for something
Yeah, but
rather
that's
than
not what
just
this is
granting a
saying.
blanket.
It's just saying placed in a manner that conceals it, which means, I think the way I read this is natural features that would conceal it. But let's just say, for example, if you had a wide open area of land that you're going to develop for industrial use, that's flat, and they need to place it somewhere near the road because that's the best location for it, then it's wide open and it's not screened and it's exposed. That's kind of where this could go. Knowing, and I worked for a developer for 15 years, the first thing that goes through their mind is, where can I put it that's the least costly? And that's what they would do. And then they would say, do we have to screen it? And it doesn't say we have to screen it. So that's my point. So I only have one.
I would also add, just as a clarification, it's talking about utility substations, gas stations, and similar use structures. Is a gas station meant to be like a natural gas substation, utility gas? Are we talking about in this, or are we talking about an actual diesel fueling pump?
Right, I think the intent was like a gas production facility, a substation. I feel
I thought it might be the other one. So if we could, Director Akers, if I could ask, or from McKenna, if we're going to wordsmith on that section 65056, could we clarify what type of gas station we're talking about?
Yes, absolutely. We'll clarify that by either, a utility substation or an actual like refueling station.
Station, yeah. Is that cool?
Yep,
Yeah, so-
absolutely. Thank you, sir. Didn't think about that one. So then I have one more. And then I think I'm done. Under, let's see, what is it? Section 6.506, coverage. Actually, no, is that the right one? Oh, yes, it is. Under number 4, where it basically gives you increased lot coverage. I mean, I understand the intent there is to try to help the developer to get additional land to do what he needs.
Which one, buddy?
It's 6.506. It's under coverage.
Under A, lot coverage?
Well, no, I'm going to go down to I'm going to actually go down to 4, number 4.
Oh,
In combination
And
with,
B
I'm
subsection
going to
4.
kind of address two things at one time, because then I'm going to say 6.507 design. And maybe to talk this through a little bit, because I haven't memorized all the ordinances, but I think I had mentioned that when we were going through this, and maybe it did get caught, was the idea that any facade that faces a residential area would have a higher level of architectural features than the typical underlaying zoning area regarding industrial buildings. And I'm not saying it needs to be all sides again, just the sides that face residential. So I think that adding something like that, and well, the other thing too is you could put it under design, where I probably think it needs to belong the most. But I know that the idea behind the coverage section is to allow the developer to increase his coverage, but in return you know, as people that live around it or work around it, you know, maybe it increases a higher level of building type or aesthetics, and that's why the landscape portion exists. So I'm thinking that maybe something like that, some language like that should be put into that. I don't know the specific language.
We have it in our existing ordinance somewhere, which can be easily
Okay.
replicated.
Yeah.
It's essentially if it's viewable from a public or private right of way,
Yeah.
the building should include screening and
Yeah,
have certain
or-
architectural
Yeah,
facade treatments.
maybe certain types of materials that are different than tilt-up concrete painted panels.
Frontage.
You know what I mean? So, or, you know, pre-manufactured steel buildings, you know, that sort of thing. I'm sure it doesn't allow that, but just to avoid something like that happening adjacent residential. And if there, I would say maybe there should be some consideration if there's some nice commercial centers as well, that maybe somehow it addresses that.
Dur-
So I would just make, here's something that, as I read through it, I almost felt like it would be helpful to have something like that built in to the number 4 superior building design as incentive for them to upgrade those facades to get some more additional, you know, consideration for increase in lot coverage. Because the items under there right now, I mean, I go through that, and I know I've sat down in rooms with developers, and there's probably a good portion of those that they would just never want to even bother with. So that's why I say if you maybe add, if it makes sense to maybe put it in both areas, I don't know, but, you know, to give them some incentive to increase their land by improving facades wouldn't be a terrible thing. And to just, in the design section, just to have something there to cover it at all instances would be a good idea.
Director Akers, if I may ask, these regulations are in addition to the underlying zoning regulations?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Yes, so under 6.506, there ties into lot coverage, so under B3 where it's superior building design, if as part of the approval, if a developer was asking for additional density, additional lot coverage percentages, these are the standards that we would use to award, if the planning commission chose to, the planning commission would use to award the additional coverage.
Got it.
Yeah, I think for a development like this, a lot of, if I go down the list, Energy Star certification may not be too bad. Low impact building design features, maybe. Alternate renewable energy systems, some of these things, if they're developing as spec, which almost feels like probably most of them are, because they're, you know, looking for somebody to occupy buildings that they believe that can be occupied. That probably a good portion of those probably wouldn't be desired lead, probably wouldn't happen for something like that. And adaptive reuse, it would be applicable only if there's a building there already, right? So that one just kind of just almost goes away most of the time. But the last one, F, is a really good one, I think. And that's why I think that maybe there's some incentive regarding the facade as well.
So that I understand what you're saying, are you suggesting that in section 6506B3, superior building design, there currently isn't any point that says if it's a particularly attractive building, they can meet, they get the bonus? This only says it has to be Energy Star certified, has to be low impact design, has to be renewable, has to be LEED certified. Adaptive reuse and inclusion of bioswales is point
Nothing.
F. You want a point G that says, or if the building is spectacular looking?
Well, I think you could come up with something different.
Yeah, I mean, you know, from a technical, but from a technical
Right,
standpoint, yeah, I'm sorry.
and I think probably specifically related to what it's adjacent to.
It's not a bad thought.
I like it.
Especially if we have other zoning rules that call out, you know, a superior architectural appearance might be a reason to allow the increase in lot coverage. It's worth considering, sure, I think.
So the
Sounds
interesting thing
reasonable.
about that is you put something similar into design. While they're designing the building, that also allows them to take advantage of the one for lot coverage. So it kind of incentivizes them even more to do both.
So just as a, all right, so I would hope that McKenna would look at the language and see if that could be accommodated. But I do want to point out that section 6503B, the area under modification criteria, one of them, section 1, does say innovative design, which I think might actually cover, you know, if you have a very innovative and attractive looking building, and it may trigger the ability for us to consider a modification, but I understand you would like it spelled out
I read
more.
that, and innovative, I mean, you can play with the word innovative, it could be anything. And I don't think you could enforce anything, you know, well, it's not, hey, we're making the whole roof solar, that's innovative, you know.
There's also compatibility. The modification shall provide for an arrangement that enhances the compatibility of the PUD with existing or planned uses on adjacent land. An attractive building is more compatible.
Yeah, I know
So,
what you're
okay,
saying.
I understand, I understand.
I know what you're saying. I've been on the other side.
I hear you, I hear you.
Further discussion.
No, I'm good.
I did, Director Akers, on that point E, the dock to floor area ratio, the document in front of us says 1 truck dock per 8,000 square feet gross floor area. That's less than the M1 district, right?
Oh, actually, that's
Or
the
is it the
same.
same?
It's the same as the M1
It's
district.
not more.
It's not more.
That's what needed
So-
to happen.
Actually, and this is a typo I found in our zoning ordinance, actually. The language in the zoning ordinance says 1 to 8,000, but in parentheses, the number next to it's 4,000, so it's something else that we need to correct. But that was the source of the error.
Okay, but you did check, we're not making it more. That's,
Right,
the
so-
intent is
so
that
it
it
would
not be
be-
more.
It would be 1 truck dock for every 8,000 square feet of gross floor area instead of 1 truck dock per 4,000 square feet of gross floor area.
Anyone else? Comments?
I do think it's a pretty good ordinance standard. We worked on it a long time. I mean, for it to get to here, and we only have 1 or 2 remaining issues at the commission level is pretty good. I mean, for ordinances that we've worked on, that's a big deal. I think it addresses a lot of the, you know, concerns about putting in a development like this, and I think it will stand up well to a public hearing if we were to go forward with it.
You don't think all the wording that corrections and changes, you don't want to come back to make,
I think you should finish it.
I'm not so sure it shouldn't come back here before we send it to the township.
I would agree. I think you should get the right language in, be done, so you're not messing around with adding stuff
Everybody's
later.
saying,
When it's presented to the public, it is we hope is going to be the very final document, right?
Yep.
Yep.
I'm okay with that.
Director Akers, you made a comment about site condominiums. That is not to be included with this, is it?
No, there's no, it was a question that was brought up for our township attorney as to whether you could do a site condominium with a PUD, and you can. But based on some of those conversations, we pulled anything that might conflict or cause an issue or so there's nothing to be added to it related to it.
Okay, because I know when we were getting this ready to go, we wanted to make sure that it was for industrial office type applications and not for residential.
Right.
Okay.
I think the issue, as I remember it, was that you could also have an industrial site condominium where the industrial lot is subdivided into multiple areas of ownership, all under one, you know, kind of like one locus of control like you'd have for an HOA or a condominium association. And that caused issues with regard to property lines and zoning of property parcels, and it really was, we thought, oh, with the language that was in there, it was complicating it. So I think that's what got cleaned up.
Okay. Good. So we will wait until this comes back before us and then issue a public hearing and go forth from there?
Yes.
Okay.
Going to see the additional language.
I would say at your next meeting.
Next
we-
week?
We could get that,
Get it in advance of that.
absolutely, but, well, with your agenda.
Well, we can, Vidya and I will chat tomorrow. We'll make some adjustments, and then we'll try to get them to the commission as soon as we get them.
Subcommittee's still active, right? Send it to the subcommittee too. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Okay.
Okay. Takes care of item number 3. Is there any further discussion concerning item 3? Okay, moving ahead. Item number 4, 2024 Planning Commission Annual Activity, Master Plan Update, and Public Participation Report. Overview by the Township staff. Director Power.
So, before you,
Director Akers, I'm sorry.
It is also 2025.
Yes.
so we are required by the Michigan Planning Enabling Act to prepare an annual report based on the Planning Commission activities. In addition to that, as a participant in the Redevelopment Ready Communities Program from the MEDC, we are required to do annual updates on our public participation plan efforts, as well as annual updates on the status of our master plan. So, in the spirit of, putting all of this information in one spot, I have consolidated all those reports into one report, which addresses all of those. So in that report, we gave an overview of some of the public engagement activities that we've done over the years between the Planning Commission and the DDA. Some of our broader activities like the economic development and marketing strategy, the number of approvals and considerations we've had over that year, and some of the projects that we've considered or in the process of considering or closing out. So all that's in the report. I've also attached a table that looks at the implementation of our master plan and some of the efforts that have been made over the last year. And yeah, that essentially summarizes what we've done. The format is similar to prior years. There weren't any significant changes from that format. If the next step for the Planning Commission, if they agree with it and feel it represents the activities of the Planning Commission, would be to forward it to the Township Board, and then we will keep moving along. So happy to answer any questions about the report.
Planning Commission, any discussion on the issues, on the item?
2024 was a busy year.
Yeah.
I see that.
Yeah.
I see that.
I guess the only thing I would suggest, when it goes to the board, we need to use different stationery so that Sherry's name's not there and Wayne is.
Trustee Frazier is a different Trustee Frazier this year.
Yeah, I need to update the stationery. I will do so.
Okay, do we have any other discussion
Report?
on the report?
I think it was a great job putting it all together. That was a lot of work.
Yes. Very good. Then is it ready to go to the Township Board?
I would say it is.
Do we have any action on it then?
Mr. Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of the annual report to the Township Board. With the condition that it be printed out on different letterhead, and that we review the, no, just, it's okay, on different letterhead. I think the date's right.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jar, supported by Commissioner Creel, to send the report to the Township Board. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none? Roll call.
Bud,
Yes.
Bernie Grant, Peter Creel,
Yes.
Jackson Paul, Jeff Jar,
Yes.
Brian Cullen.
Okay, motion carries. That will be sent. Okay, and last up, any announcements?
There was just one thing I wanted to highlight. So two things I wanted to highlight. So for the February 12th meeting, the Planning Commission will see the non-residential PUD ordinance back. You will also see the pond application returned to you. The excavation permit was approved by the Township Board yesterday evening. So you guys will see that application back before you, and there's one other application that you'll see before you, which it escapes me. I forgot. I'll make sure I email everybody.
Pulte coming?
Yes, Pulte is coming. Thank you. So Pulte Homes will be resubmitting their plan back to the Planning Commission. They had to make some changes to the layout of their plan, so it will be coming back before the Planning Commission on the 12th. So with that, the other announcement that I wanted to make is I wanted to give the Planning Commission kind of an update as far as staffing in our department and how all that's working. So as you know, we've had difficulty recruiting a planning director after Dan Power left. So we've gone through a couple rounds of interviews, seeking different applicants. We weren't really able to find somebody who we felt comfortable enough with appointing a planning director. So what we have chosen to do, and it was approved by the Township Board last night, is we had created a planning and zoning specialist position. There was somebody internal in our office, Brittany Williams, who I know you've all met. She's been handling a lot of the coordination of planning commission activities. She's been answering a lot of zoning questions and been doing a really, really good job of it. She is going to be the person filling in that position. So you'll be seeing a little bit more of her. And also, of course, I'm still going to be around. I'm still going to be attending most of the planning commission meetings as well as Vidya and Gage. And so, and everything will be coordinated. Brittany will primarily be doing zoning, the internal zoning reviews that we typically handle. She'll be answering questions, working with applicants, making sure the plans that get reviewed go to the right individuals for their reviews, that the letters are all compiled and taken care of. And she'll be doing site inspections and all that as well. So I just wanted to let the Planning Commission know kind of what the changes were and let you know that all the planning stuff here in the township is still in very good hands with everybody. So we're very excited. I think this is going to be a good change. I think it's going to balance some things for us, and it'll work out really, really well. So.
Very good. Glad to hear that that position has been handled in some manner. To hopefully to relieve you of some of the.
Yes, it certainly will.
Okay, I have one other update, and that's the meeting next Wednesday at 5 o'clock at the library. I believe we're in the COZAD room at the library. 5 o'clock. That's a joint planning commission meeting with Sumter, Belleville, and us, Van Buren. And I think we all look forward to that, to hear and see what's going on in our communities, because we are pretty much a joint community, even though we do have separate governing bodies. So that is scheduled for next Wednesday, January 29th. Other than that, glad everybody had a safe and enjoyable holiday, hopefully, and we're back at it for another year. And it looks like a good one. Maybe by the end of the year, we can actually be able to travel across the Denton Road. Let's hope. Any further comments from anyone? With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I support that.
Motion.
We have a motion and support to adjourn. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Didn't think so. Okay, meeting is now adjourned. Oh, we had
I
to.
wasn't teasing you, man. It really didn't print.